Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's D5 Render Live workshop. We're thrilled to have you here as we dive into the world of high-quality photorealistic rendering. This session is designed to help you take your visualization skills to the next level. And today, we're honored to have Andy Christoforou with us. Andy is a senior applied technology specialist at KPF, an architect and an industry leader in visualization and AI. With over 15 years of experience, he's worked on some of the most cutting-edge projects in architecture. You may recognize him from our past webinars at Autodesk University or on his own YouTube channel, where he shares expert insights on rendering and visualization. And before I hand it over to Andy, I just want to remind everyone to stay on after the workshop for your chance to win a 14-day trial of D5 Render Pro. So now let's jump into today's session. Andy will walk us through a start-to-finish workflow for rendering a modern home using the latest tools in D5 Render to achieve stunning, realistic results. So without further ado, Andy, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jeff. Hey, everybody. I'm happy to be back at these workshops and webinars with D5. Always honored to come back. So before we get into it, if you don't know me or you do know me, I run a YouTube channel as a little side hobby of mine, in addition to like the 40,000 other things I'm doing. So if you ever want like latest D5 news or tips and tricks, every week I drop about 1 or 2 videos. I've got about 75 videos all about D5. So be sure to check that out. Jeff is going to drop in, the links for this. So we've got that. And then the other thing I'm super excited and proud of is I just released what I'm calling the ArcViz Academy. This is basically me dumping 15 years of experience of architecture and ArcViz into one program. It's designed for anyone who's like a designer, architect, freelancer, student to understand D5 like a pro, and also make money through freelancing. So I highly recommend you check it out. We're running an awesome promotion where you can get lifetime access, but I literally treat this like a college course. Like we go through 3D fundamentals, how to read floor plans, what makes a good material, making beautiful D5 models, and creating like awesome portfolio projects. So there's about like 3 different projects we do, and you can use that to get a job, get clients, and then I'll show you how to make money. So anyways, Jeff is dropping the links in there for you to check it out. It's a great little community that we're growing and building, and I'm super proud of it. So it's pretty cool. But anyways, again, my name is Andy Christoforou. I am a D5 render certified instructor. I work at KPF. We work on like really large, complex projects, and I've been teaching kind of software for like the past, 10 years at this point. And recently I got into YouTube, which led into the ArcViz Academy. So today we are going to be rendering this project. This is called Westbrook Residence. It's an awesome project. If you watch my videos and tutorials, I always love using real world projects. The reason I do this is so you have something to compare it to. So you have reference photos and everything. So there's a Dropbox folder that Jeff has dropped in. This has got everything you need to follow along, if you want to follow along. If you don't want to, that's fine. You can just watch Zen out and we will show you my process. But we've got a SketchUp file, the renderings that I created. So here's an example of the rendering. So as you can see, it looks pretty darn close to this. Yeah, real project rendering. And then same thing with the kitchen. And for those wondering what I'm using here, this is a program called PureRef. Really handy. Jeff told me about it. I love it. You can also tell it to be on top of all your other windows. I can always do that. And now I can do like a little comparison. So that's really what we'll be making together. So if you want to follow along, download the project files. Anyways, that's enough talking there. We are going to hop right into D5. So open up your launchers and let's hit new. So we're literally starting this from scratch. We've got 1 hour to do the exterior and the interior. It's pretty ambitious, but the reason I love D5 is because we can do all this stuff so quickly. So, and that's not like a plug. That's like the reality. Like, when I did my tests on this project, we were getting beautiful results very quickly, as you saw there. So we actually don't need that much time. So one of the reasons I've kind of gravitated to D5. So anyways, we're going to be tackling this view specifically. Obviously, you could do this view on your own time, but for the sake of today's session, we'll be covering this one. And time permitting, this one / this one. But we'll see how it goes. I'll take little pauses, take some questions, when things are loading and everything. And if anything's like really, really important, Jeff will speak up and let me know. I see some people downloading. That's great. So like any project in D5, you have a couple different ways to import your files. Me personally, because of like the nature of my work, I usually use the direct import method. And that's because I'm usually getting projects that are like done and I don't need to like design with them. And what I mean by that is if I had to design, let's say I'm an architect, I would use the Live Sync plugin in SketchUp. But here, since I'm giving you the files and you may not have SketchUp, we could do the direct import. Totally fine. So I've got that. And I'm going to just grab that. Don't mind my folders and files. I'm going to open this up. It's a semi-lightweight file, about 45 megabytes. So here it's being added to my import container. Very important. I feel like people always forget the import container is different from the object container. Objects don't live in the object outliner unless they're brought out of the import container. So all I'm going to do is click once and drag it out. So I'm going to place it here. And, you kind of saw that I just dropped it in randomly, haphazardly. We never want to do that. Well, you have to start to do that. You want to make sure you hit sync coordinates right after that. That way, it fits perfectly on your site in terms of like coordinates. And if you need to import other files that are basically like companion files to this, they will drop in at the same spot. Think of doing work sessioning files with other people. Maybe someone's doing landscape or you're doing the architecture. You want them to all come together. So that's why you always hit sync coordinates. The Live Sync plugin actually does this automatically. So this will be grayed out. But since I didn't, we got that here. So now let me swing over to the object outliner. So this is what I was talking about with it now appearing here. The problem is I've got all this clipping from my terrain. So I'm just going to turn that off. Okay. So next thing I always do is I always switch to fly mode. I am team fly mode, fly till I die. But I don't like the orbit mode. So if you're wondering how I'm flying around, I am using the fly mode. So we're talking about the front of our project. This is what we'll be rendering. So if you want to kind of position your camera, this should look, semi-familiar, right? That's that big window right there. So before I get into any project, what I always want to figure out is what are the materials we're dealing with. So I always do like a little survey here. And this kind of happens in two different ways. Either the client is sending me the materials and they're saying, hey, this is what I need, or I just have to look at the actual colors of the model or the reference photo. So here I could see we've got this like white brick. I've got this metal paneling up here. We've got glass, of course. We've got some, organic materials, right? We've got like our gravel. We've got this like metal deck thing, which is pretty cool. Metal windows and everything. And that's really it for the exterior. Then in the interior, we've got like a bunch of, flooring and oaks and everything. Much less complicated than what's going on out here. So once I do that, I position my sun in a way where I have the sunlight on what I'm working on. Think of anything you try doing in the real world. You want to have light when you're doing task lighting. So it's the same way with materials. Materials will always look different in the shade. So you always want to have some sort of light on them. So a couple ways of doing it, either change the time of day or just choose the north offset. This is going to be changed later when we do our nice, beautiful renderings. This is literally so I can see and I'm not working in the dark. Okay. So then, somebody's asking how's the 5080 working for me. So fun fact, I did not plug it in because I was too scared of a driver issue or a compatibility issue or a power issue. So I didn't plug it in. I'm still using my 3080. People ask me all the time what I have. Hopefully after this workshop, I could plug the 5080 in, but still on the 3080. Another thing people often ask me is, what are all these numbers up here? These are the statistics for how well your file is running. If you want them on, I actually recommend you always have them on. You want to do show statistics under view. And really the value you should care the most about is your FPS, that's the frame rate, and then the amount of faces. The faces is like how much stuff is in your file, how many polygons. As this number goes up, your frame rate usually goes down, okay? So just pay attention to that. That's why I have that in there. So when I import something, I'm like, oh my God, now my frame rate's like 2 FPS. I'm going to reevaluate, do I really need that? Do I need to optimize it? And so on. So that's what that is. A little tidbit there. And if you're using, a recent NVIDIA card, you may have more or less of these. Always have them on. NVIDIA and D5 are doing some amazing AI magic, and it just makes it run faster and smoother. Anyways, that's my rant there. So let's go over to assets. And now let's start talking about how to create these materials. So for the sake of time and everyone's sanity, what I did was I favorited the materials I'm going to use. If you didn't know, you can actually hover over any material and favorite it and then filter. Look at that. So these filters, this is actually really useful. If you are a community user, not like a pro user, this will give you all the free assets so you don't run into that issue where you find a beautiful material, realize it's pro and you can't use it. You also have if it's dynamic or still, and if it's a high definition asset. But most importantly, the favorite. Okay. So these, and up to you guys if you want to like screenshot it or whatever, but these are the materials that we're going to be using. And you're probably wondering, well, how do I get these materials? All you have to do is see the name, just type right here. You can actually search the assets right here. So let's say I want to do the bricks. The bricks are actually this gray staggered strip stone. So if you were to follow along, let me turn off my filter. I would do gray staggered strip stone. And that's that same stone there, right? So that's, or brick, sorry. That's to make everyone's lives easier. So I'll leave this up for a second. And now I'm seeing a question. The reference photo is from an actual building. Yeah, it's an actual project. You can check it out. It's called Westbrook Residence on ArcDaily. I'm just a fan of like this type of architecture. In New York, we don't have like fun architecture like this. We have like a lot of like peaks and everything. I feel like I should live maybe in Cali or something where we get flat modern architecture. But anyways, that's why I usually do these types of projects. And they're always about the materials. It's not like in New York where it's like vinyl siding or something. It's like fun. Anyways, so this is the gray stagger strip stone. Again, you've got the favorite control. You've got the search. You can follow along here. So I'm going to click this and I'm going to drag over here. And if you don't know, typically how the materials are applied is D5 is scanning for the like material or layer. So anything that's this like gray, well, not gray, light green color is going to be picked up as this stone color. So, I talked a little bit about reference photos and why I think they're so important. By default, I can immediately tell that this material is close, but it's not perfect. Some of the things that need to be fixed is the actual coloring of the brick. It's a little too gray. So there's two ways of tackling color. If I go to the base color map slot here, you can see that this by default is like a grayish texture. If you open up the advanced settings, you can actually desaturate right here. And this is going to start removing some of the color if you want. And you can also brighten it. So that's what this is. It's hue, saturation, and brightness. So I can brighten this up. Let's go somewhere there. Go somewhere like that. And I'll leave that for now. And then I'm going to go over to base color and I can just lighten it up right here. So because there's like a little bit of warmth in there, I might go a little bit, this way. But that's basically how I do my first initial tweaks. And then obviously as I start putting the materials together, I customize it further. But then the next thing I always do is I check all my sliders, is the normal map good? I think one is a little extreme. I'll bring that back. Specular, totally fine at 0.3. This is brick, so it's not going to be super shiny. Roughness is high. And then ambient occlusion, I do want to see all the shading in there. That's totally fine. And then this is using displacement. So I'm fine with something like that. Really, it's the stretch here. And I feel like my brick should be a little smaller. So I'm literally just going to stretch it here and make them smaller. Somebody's asking, what does specular do? Specular is for highlights. So it's like how intense your highlights are. Let me show you on the glass. You see how bright and dark that is? So it's basically like how much is reflected or absorbed. So 0.3 is like a really good default value. Bricks aren't like super, super shiny. So I like the default value. So anyways, we've got that. Then we've got all these other materials to bring in here. We could do our organic materials like our gravel right here. And for this guy, we could do something like this, dark gravel ground. And I just dropped that in. And there we go. That looks pretty close. Fine with that. You could also use one of these. Again, we're making it up. We're doing what we think looks about right, And I'm also going to grab the black size stone and put it in here Okay, cool. And then I always just like fly in, make sure, okay, is it the right scale? Does it look good? And I'm pretty happy with those. So this is generally the process I do. It's like once I have the materials, I can start targeting the exact materials and how to tweak them. So then the next ones I want to start fixing are these like deck materials. So this is a really cool deck. This is like an actual metal deck. It's not like your typical wood deck. So if I go down here, I want to focus on this. And one thing I've always loved about D5 is like you can actually take any material and make it look like something else. So here, I actually don't have it here. I want to use like a rusty metal. So if I go over to my metal category and just uncheck this, there's a nice rusty brass. Let me save that so I can add it to my little library here. And this is what I'm talking about in terms of like what's really amazing. I can grab this guy, and although it's brass and it's like yellow and it looks nothing like the metal that I'm talking about, I can always customize it. So let me play with the sun a little bit just so I can see my metal, and let me start tweaking. So right off the bat, the base color is off. That's like the biggest difference, right? So I'm going to grab this, and a little fun fact, you see this eyedropper tool? Most people think this is just for things in D5. Well, no, it can actually go outside of D5. So you see how it's picking up the colors of the metal deck? So that's super useful because I'm not constrained to whatever's in here. Most real-time rendering softwares are constrained. So this is like a nice little thing D5 does. So if I click this, I now have the color chip from that, which is really, really amazing. So the reason this is important is when I do, freelance work, a lot of my clients are like, oh, I want this like Benjamin Moore color. So that's a paint color, and it's like a paint code. I can literally just grab it from here and I'm ready to go, right? You could also put in a hex code. That's this value right here. And that's typical for like most colors and everything. But anyways, you've got that there. And then I'm just literally going to tweak, all my settings. I can roughen up this so it's not super, super metallic. And that's actually one of the reasons why the metallic bar has values outside of 0 or 1, 1 meaning metallic, 0 non-metallic, is because of how rust works. Some things are more metallic than others. So I'm going to lower that. And then I'm just going to scuff this up a little bit so it's not super shiny. That's super shiny. This is super rough because, again, it's rusted. The thing I don't like is this like seam right here. You could argue, maybe this is the way of construction, but why do that when I have my UV randomizer and I can make it triplanar? And sorry, I thought it was the texture. It's actually this bend right here. But anyways, I would do triplanar anyways. And that's just to mix up the UVs so I get nice, variation here. So that's cool. And now I can just play with the stretch. And we got that. And I always, always, always have round corner on because in the real world, nothing is super sharp. You see that? Super sharp, ugly, super beautiful. Because think about how this metal is like formed, right? It's actually like bent into place. So that looks beautiful. I'm happy with that. I could, sit here and play with the colors to make it, more orange or not, but you get the point. So then here, for any textures that are brought in from like SketchUp or Rhino, you have a couple ways of handling them. You could go the AI route and like enhance it, make it Ultra HD, make it seamless, and then generate the textures here. You could totally do that. It's like one of my favorite features in D5 where you do that and then it will generate your normal maps and everything. That's one way of doing it. Totally fine. I think the only issue is by default when you are putting this in like SketchUp or something, SketchUp can't really handle high-res textures, so they're usually like 512 or like 1K. And sure, you could do the Ultra HD texture, but you might be better off just grabbing something from the D5 library. So up to you how you want to handle that. I'm just going to grab this anti-corrosion wood, and I'm going to do the same thing I did before with my color. I'm just going to grab color chip, and I'll grab something like that. And that's a little too intense, so then I'm just going to bring down the saturation and make it a little bit darker. Okay. And I could do the same thing here if I want. Just go a little bit darker. So yeah, you could sit there and customize all the time. One thing I do notice is my rotation is wrong. So you just go right here and you type in 90 and that will rotate, but now my scaling is wrong. So then I play with the scale until I get it about right. So some people often ask me, well, how do I know how big something is? The hackiest way I found is like you can literally model like a 6-inch box and say, hey, that's the width of these boards, and then match your UVs to that. That's one way of handling it. It'd be great if there was like a way where I could say, hey, I don't know, this board to be 5 inches, and I could scale it kind of like you would in like CAD or like Revit, but that's, maybe down the line. So we've got that. Let me take a little look. Okay, great. Payusha is asking, what is the use of limit color bleeding? Yeah, so you see this pink here. If I check this off, limit color bleeding, it'll basically prevent the amount of like pink bouncing around. You get that a lot with like large swaths of like greens and reds where it's actually lighting, like it's the rays are bouncing and being carried around. It'll eliminate that. So you see how this is like cyan here. If I turned color bleeding off, it wouldn't bounce as much there. So that's what that is. So anyways, now we've got glass. So glass, I always start with normal glass and I pop that in, and I always customize this after I get all my assets in, just because it's best for me to kind of like compare it to the real life photo, because you don't want to calibrate it without everything in there, and then it just doesn't look right. So I'll get back to that. Then let's take a look at our, at our windowsills here, right? We've got this like metal, this dark metal. It's got a little bit of brown in it. It's not 100% black. You can kind of see that here. So like I did with the rusty brass down here, I can just hit my eyedropper. I can go to duplicate, and now I'm going to apply it here. But the coloring is wrong. So I'm just going to hop in there and just desaturate and darken it. Something like that. And then I'm going to play with the scale. So it looks more like paint. Okay. I'm going to lower my normal a little bit. Okay. And I want it to shine a little bit more. And I really like the variation I'm getting. You can kind of see it right here. You see how some parts are dark, some parts are light. Well, that's because the roughness map is like working correctly, and it's telling you, which area should be dark, which area should be, light. And the real world is like really dirty and covered in filth. So that's why these roughness maps are really, really important. Okay, so then we've got, these little slabs here. These are your sills. And all I'm going to do is just grab this rough concrete guy and place that in there. And as always, I'm always going to turn on round corner and soften that up. Talking about this rough concrete, I'm going to drop that in here as well. Okay, there we go. And we turn on our round corner. We could do some triplanar and UV randomizer if you want, and we can just play with the stretch. There you go. Yeah, I'm seeing the real displacement comments. It's a very, very hot topic. I was just talking to Jeff about that before. Yeah, but I feel like from far away, you can't really tell. But yeah, it would be nice to have like more geometry levels to that for sure. So then we've got the metal here. We've got the metal here that changed as well. All that's really left on the exterior is like the door, the soffit here, and this larger area, and obviously the grass, but we'll get to that in a moment. So for the metal here, what I did was I was going through the what's it called? The library, trying to find something that looks similar to this. So what's interesting about this is like, it looks like metal, but it's also has like a lot of nice texture to it. You can kind of see all the variations in it right here. So I found this really nice leather. So if I apply this here, and bear with me, we're going to tweak it a little bit. It's a good starting point. So I'm going to grab the base color. I'm going to do that trick again where I grab the color code of that. And I'm just going to desaturate the color map because there's too much influence of this being put in there. So I'm just going to desaturate it. And I'm going to add some brightness. And there we go. So now we're getting closer to that. And I'm going to switch back here and I'm going to gray it out a bit. So they're kind of working hand in hand. And then it's kind of the same process where I'll go in, I'll do my triplanar, my randomizer, my round corner, and there we go. So that's already looking much, much better. But now, since this was a leather, I have to make it look like a metal, right? So then I can crank up my metal, right? I don't want to go all the way because it doesn't look like it's a super shiny metal like the frames here. So I'm just going to raise that a little bit. The roughness, I don't want it to be glass, right? I want it to be, we don't want reflections like that. I want it probably around here because it is like a rough weathered thing. The specular, I'm going to raise a little bit as well. And the normal, I'll boost that as well. So here we go. We're getting some nice highlights here, which is what we want. And this is looking good. So then I can pop over here. I've got, a soffit here, which is just typical paint. This soffit is also on the same layer as my ceiling. So all I have to do, I can just find like a paint material. Let me just turn this off and let's just search for paint. And I could grab this guy. And like I was saying earlier, like any material you get, you can just make it look like something else. So although this has got like a lot of texture and color, I can just go in there and override everything. I can make my base color 0, right? I can lower my the amount of like roughness going on here. So I can play with this. I can remove the map if I want. If I think it's bringing in too much different texture, I can brighten this. Like I've got a bunch of different options. So there we go. So now I just got a little bit of that. And I can keep making it brighter to remove any of those details. Again, I just want a little bit of variation. That's it. So that's usually what I do. I just like tweak at every single level. And then this guy, if I remember correctly, is like a wood door. So then this is where I can just grab my favorite materials. I can grab yellow birch. And there we go. And as always, you can just rotate the you can rotate the UVs as needed. So I want that to go up and down. I'm happy with that. And that is pretty good in terms of like the architecture. Obviously, we've got the grass and everything, but most importantly, I want to save. If you haven't saved yet, let's just do that. So let's go File, Save. And while this is saving, let me take some questions. Let me grab my folder again. And actually, if you guys want this this file that I'm working on, I'm going to save it right here. So we'll call this Westbrook Live Demo. Okay, and that's saving. So let me see. Let me take some questions real quick. All right, what is triplanar? Triplanar is basically like a world scale. You're not going to notice it too much if your UVs are clean. You're really going to notice it if your UVs are like really like sloppy and distorted. Basically applies like a uniform world scale on the material. Basically, let's say you had a faceted element, right? So something like, let me grab a basic model. Sometimes out of 3D softwares, yeah, this isn't even a great example. Each like face has got like a different UV or scale. It happens sometimes. I don't know. Sometimes scaling, something gets weird, something gets pushed. This could have a different scale versus that, or different orientation. This unifies it. Triplanar just unifies it. If you're like from the Unreal Engine world, it's basically like a world scale. That way, it's nice and uniform on all the faces. Generally, since we try to be as clean as possible with our models, we don't have that issue, but sometimes it comes up between different elements, like especially since this container is a different model from this, they share the same material. So sometimes there's like a different scale. So that's all that is. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah, I've got PureRef over here. Yeah, it can live above different softwares. Jeff, did I miss any other big questions? I don't think so. Do you always make sure that the raw render looks right first, or you don't mind it too much because, oh, that's a great question. So the question is, how far do I bring my raw render before post-processing? Okay, so in my opinion, the biggest amount of like change or weight is done in the raw render. So let me give you an analogy in terms of like architecture, in terms of like where the cost is decided on is like, oh, is this going to be an expensive project? Really comes from the concept and schematic design phase. That's where you have the most control because that's where you're doing the most work, or the the biggest moves, the most work. If you try to do the same thing in like construction document mode or post-processing mode, you're not going to have the same amount of like influence. So I try to get the raw as far as possible, and then I'll either bring it into Photoshop or I'll do post AI. So try to do as much as possible in D5 before Photoshop. The other issue is I deal with a lot of like client revisions, and you don't want to keep post-processing all day long or you're going to lose your mind. So I try to have my source model as up-to-date or as complete as possible so I don't have to visit another software. With post AI, I really don't go to Photoshop anymore, which is great because it saves me time, saves me money. So it's great. So yeah, I hope that answers it. Can you do changes in SketchUp? Yes. So Lulu asks, is there a live sync plugin? Yes. If you have the live sync plugin in SketchUp, which, I don't know who's got SketchUp, so that's why we do the direct import, you can literally model and render at the same time. It's pretty amazing. So I'm going to, and then what do I mean by post AI? Post AI is this little guy right here. This guy will appear every time you do a rendering. It will basically let you upscale your image. You can do in painting, which just came with 2.10. I'll show you this once I render something. We don't see anything because I haven't rendered anything, but that's really where I do my post-processing. And I feel like the AI upscaler in D5 is like challenging some of the like third-party upscalers, which is great. Again, it's like one less thing you have to pay for, one less thing you have to worry about. So, okay. All right, so let's continue. Someone was asking before about the bouncing. So if you see here, there's kind of like a little purple tinge. That's what that limit color bleeding is. If I turn that off, the purple's going to go away. So now as light bounces off of this and hits this, it doesn't add pink. So that's what that is. This is just like a rubber membrane roof. So you can literally just grab, I don't know, you can grab anything and nobody's looking up there. So I can say like rubber if I want. Yeah, and I'll just add this here. All right, cool. So then let's talk about the landscaping. Landscaping, we will use the scatter tool, but for the sake of like performance, what I like to do is just apply some sort of like 2D texture. So I'll look for an outdoor material. I could do grassland, and I'll apply this here first. And I'll just play with the scaling just so I'm not getting any issues. And you'll notice that I don't have my handy dandy triplanar because we're in displacement mode. I don't care about displacement right now. So I'm going to switch to custom. And now I get my favorite tools back. And then I place it somewhere like that. I just want to look like grass until I apply it. And the reason I do this, because when you apply scatter, it actually doesn't change the texture below. It's not supposed to. So I've seen times where someone has like a bright green floor and they have like realistic grass on top, and you can see the bright green below it. So that's why I do that. So then over here, these are some of the other materials. I've got ground here. I can literally just grab some of the assets I used before. So this is just like another mulch looking thing. So let me see if I saved anything for that. I could use, let me clear this out, all materials. I could just grab deciduous woodland and place that there. Okay. And then as always, I go in and I change the scaling. So a little pro tip with the scaling, which you might not know, by default, it's linked, meaning if you change the U or the X, the Y will change as well. If you unlink this, you can actually do it separately. There are times where you want that to happen. Like let's say I wanted to squish the brick height. That's when I would use that. Okay. So that's what that's about. All right. So we've got that. I'm going to hit save. Okay. And now if I want to add scatter for my grass here, I would go right over here to the scatter tool. So something I want to point out. Yes, there is the grass material in D5 as a template, right? There is the grass one. But I would argue the scatter tool is like so much better, mostly because I can control the actual grass like densities and objects in it. So watch what I mean. If I go over here and, I love this little new preset thing. So if you didn't see that, this is 2.10. I hit lawn and it just brings me to lawn landscape. I love that. I love natural meadow 10. So it's picking up all my grass plane here. If I click this and hit create, it's going to give me two different grass models in here once it loads. And I can literally choose the scaling of them, the coloring of them, the amount they spawn in. And this is much more flexible than the grass material. So I'm just going to make it really, really tall just to illustrate this point. I have a lot more control with this, right? So you see how I made grass 58 really, really tall? So that's literally why I use scatter. I can always add more variation, which I typically do, because if you think about like going outside, you've got like grass, you've got like weeds, you got maybe some like flowers or like wild grass. This is the only way you're going to do that. And I feel like the grass is so much more realistic. And you can also see that ground texture I applied before. So this looks great. Could I say, oh, maybe the scale should be a little bit higher? Yeah. I just go in there, I swap that out, and I'm good to go. So and then I've got this. Okay. Perfect. All right. So now we've got all that. We've got our scatter. Beautiful. So now the exterior is looking pretty good, but let's get some of our assets in there. So like I was doing before with the materials, I kind of cheated a little bit, and I want to give you the species names of each of these trees. So these trees are coming from right over here. We've got this big one. We've got some mini trees, some mini bushes here, some bushes in here. So what I did was I found all the different species in D5. So let's start with this big one. So this big one is called Sapium sebiferum. And a question I get is like, how do you know what tree it is? There's two ways. You could literally ask ChatGPT to tell you what it is. Or you could just look around. I know it's not like the greatest answer, but sometimes literally looking through the asset library, you'll see the tree. But ChatGPT has been like really good at identifying it, so give that a shot. So anyways, I'm looking for Sapium. It's right here. I've got 19, and I'm just going to plug it right in here. It's kind of like the central focal point of this project. So I'm going to place it there. And when I click it, I can, scale it up. If I hit V on my keyboard, that's my hotkey. If you don't like hotkeys, you can just swap right there. So I've got that there, and I can rotate it. I can literally just keep hitting V until I get it in the right spot. So I'm happy with that. So then let's talk about these little bushes here. So these bushes are called Berberis thunbergi, and these represent the bushes right here. Okay, so I'll bring that up, Berberis thunbergi. Okay, and we've got a bunch, so this is called O3, perfect. So in this instance where I've got a bunch in a row, there are a couple ways you could handle this, right? You see how there's like 5? You could path it, meaning like use the path tool, or you could place it, right? Totally fine doing either. It doesn't really matter. But what I'm going to do, since there's only a couple, before I place anything, I'm holding down C to lower the scale, right? So I'm just going to do that just so they fit. So I'll place that there. And I'm just holding C and dragging my mouse up and down. That's a nice little edit trick I'll give you. So you don't need to place and then rescale. And what's nice is it will automatically change the scale and the rotation for you. If for some reason it's not in, I want to say it was like 2.9 or 2.10, D5 added these two little gizmos, random rotation and random location and random size. So you can actually just click this if you want variation. I notice a lot of beginners will have a lot of like samey assets next to each other. Just use these buttons. That's literally what they're for. So that's how we handle that. Then we've got this little tree right here. And again, I'm just going to go to my little cheat sheet. And the species for that guy is Acer palmatum. So I'm just going to go over here. Acer palmatum. Okay, and it's thumb. And I can just drop this in here. And since this is really big, I'm going to hold down C, right? Holding down C, and I'm moving my cursor down, and I'm going to place it like that. So that looks about right. I could shrink it, whatever, but that's basically how you do that. So in a very quick matter of time, we got these assets done, and we can place a couple more here. So this one is the same thing as that. So I'm just going to place this here. And while I'm doing that, Okay, let's see. Okay, yeah, I don't see any comments. That's okay. Okay, so I'm going to click this and I'm just going to shrink it. And I'll do a little rotation. So again, that's V, or you could rotate it from here. Personally, I'm a big fan of the gizmo, so might as well use it. And let's add these little bushes here. So let's go to the cheat sheet, and there's three different ones. There's Buxus bodinieri. And for those who missed this before, how do I know this? I just asked ChatGPT to find assets or give me the species of that asset. So I'm just going to place a couple here, and that represents that. And then let's grab this Schefflera. Okay, and it's the fifth one that I really like. And that I'm just going to hold C again and place it like there, there, and there. Perfect. Okay, and then what else do we have in here? There's probably one more I'm missing. Oh, we could do another sapium there. Let's do this one, the Christoforou, and then we can move into the indoors. Okay, Chinese, and then we'll do O2. Actually, they all look pretty similar, but I'll grab this guy. And there we go. We got our little pops of color. Awesome. So then we look at the reference photo one more time. And there we go. So we've got enough, density in there. So then just to look at it, we were talking about matching that one camera angle, right? So our camera is going to live somewhere around here. And just looking at it, apples to apples, right? We've got pretty much all the same stuff in, maybe I darken the bricks, but you also have to factor in, we do have brightness from the sky, right? But this is basically in a really good spot. So I'm going to get back to setting up the camera in a moment. I do want to do the interior before we run out of time. So I'm just going to save a scene, and I'm just going to call this exterior. And I'm going to save and see if there's anything in the comments. All right, so Stavros is asking, can I show a man, woman, like a speed shadow? Yeah, you're talking about the motion blur. That came in 2.10. You've got in post AI a motion blur option, so that's pretty cool. Okay. All right, cool. All right, anyways, so let's go inside. So inside, we've got a bunch of wood here. We've got countertops. We've got an island. And we've got chairs. This is basically what we're trying to recreate, right? So let's start with this material. This, if we're going back to my handy cheat sheet of favorite materials, let me get this out of here. This is just a birch that has been customized, yellow birch. So you apply this here, by default, it's not going to look right. So you're going to want to switch the rotation to be 90. And we're probably going to want to increase our scaling here. So let me make this a little bit bigger. And I want to get all the contrast out of the image. So right over here, this guy is basically the contrast amount. So you can lower this. That way, there's not so much contrast. And you see how it removes so much color. So it's not as vibrant. So I can lower that a bit. I can also just desaturate it here. And I can add some brightness as well. That way I'm not getting so much of that crazy harsh contrast. So we've got that there. That looks great. Then we've got a limestone countertop. So that's honed limestone. So let's click this. I can apply that there. That will go there as well. I can also apply that there and just make it white. I'm going to make both of these white. So I'm just, going to go to base color, zero that out, and I'm going to desaturate and brighten up exactly just like that. So since I did it once and I like this material, I like the little sheen I've got here, I can actually just duplicate this and apply it there. Perfect. So then here I've got this rusted metal. I could do the same thing where I grabbed this material over here and then just duplicated it. Again, it's really important to just reuse a lot of your work, because depending on the situation you're in, you may not have all the time in the world to customize materials. So if you have done it already, why not reuse it, So this, I think, is like a little dark. So this is when I'd go in and I'd probably just try and brighten everything. So yeah, there we go. Now I'm beginning to see more and more of the texture. Exactly. And then I always like to do a check and just make sure I have round corner. Sometimes I forget when I'm in the mode of everything, the zone, I mean. Okay. And now we've got all these appliances. We've got like a stainless steel. This is sandblasted stainless steel, and I'll apply that here and there. And you always want to be careful with the metals, like how shiny everything is. That's where your roughness is going to be super important, and your specular. Sometimes if I think like it's just like not changing it enough, I'll remove the roughness mask. Yeah, there we go. And I'll control it like this, just like that. So we get some bit of variation, but not too much. So I'll do something like that. Perfect. And then this should be super shiny. Happy with that. Let's get round corner on. Great. So these textures, they were brought in from SketchUp. Since they're already like properly UV mapped, I would do my AI tool right here, and I would generate all the maps for them and then tweak the reflections and everything so it looks proper. So we've got that going. Okay. And then I lower that a bit, and I literally just go one by one, adding the AI. All right, Rafak is asking, is there a way to use a base material? No, that's actually why I do the duplicate trick. That way I make my own base material and then I duplicate it elsewhere. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Like Unreal's got like master materials that do something similar to the ones in like V-Ray and Corona. But yeah, I make the material once and then I duplicate. That's like essentially my base material. All right, so we've got that. All right, so we've got our birch here, we've got our metals, we've got the limestone, and all I need is a kind of a wood flooring, and then this is good to go. We can add some, decor here that I could pull from the D5 library, and then I'd set up some environment settings, camera settings, and we're good to go. Let me just make sure that these are changed. Yeah, so a little point I'll make out. If you've ever like followed my tutorials before, you'll notice that I always have like vibrant colors on the SketchUp models. And the reason I do that is so I know I have to change them. If they're this like gray color, I don't know I have to change them because it actually looked like it was stainless steel, but it wasn't. So that's why like we had that bright purple up here and the green and everything. So that's why I do that. So now let's try and find a wood flooring that fits this. I'm going to turn that off. And I just want something that looks clean and something birch, brown pine. I'm trying to match something like this. Let's see. This is probably one I should have favorited, but perfect. This looks good. Light brickwork, solid wood floor. I'm going to save that. Beautiful. And this is actually going in the right direction and everything looks nice. I'm getting some nice reflections there. If I think the floor is too shiny, I would just increase the roughness just a little bit. Okay. Yeah, cool. Awesome. That looks great. And maybe I remove some of the contrast. Okay. And then I play with the stretch just a little bit. I feel like they should be slightly bigger. Okay. All right, awesome. So I've got that here. This is the view I'm trying to recreate. So I'm just going to save another view and we'll call this interior. Okay, and then we are going to get into environment settings. So let me save. Let me see if there's any good questions. Will we get a link of the recorded course? Yeah, this is going to go straight to YouTube. So you'll see that there. Okay. Awesome. Roberta, it's called PureRef. I don't remember if it's free anymore. I feel like you have to pay like one time for it, but really handy because you can tell it to live on top of objects. So anyways, let's talk about exterior light settings. So once I've got my camera in a semi like okay spot, I'm going to go to edit camera. Don't forget there's a little edit camera button right here. First thing I'll do is I turn off exposure, because exposure gets everyone in trouble. So I'm actually okay with this value. The reason I say exposure gets you in trouble is because depending on what you're looking at, it's going to change your light setting. So here it's bright, but then here it's getting brighter. And then here, you see how it's like changing? That's a problem, because in ArcViz, we want everything to be, very precise and, calculated. So I turn that off. I'm okay with that. And it's always good practice to just keep updating that link. So then next, we've got projection mode. This should always be 2-point. If you don't know what this means, if you're ever looking down, you see the verticals swaying out, you want them to be perfectly straight. Here, it looks extreme and bad, but in the world of architecture photography, everything's got nice, beautiful verticals. So we do that. Aspect ratio, if I'm being like hardcore and I'm trying to match this aspect ratio, which is like the crop of the image, I would go with 9:16 to make it portrait. And then I would tweak my focal length to bring it in. Generally, this is like controversial, but like the human eye is like 18-22. Personally, if I'm like trying to match this photo or I'm doing my own work, I feel like my images are like 25 to like 35, and then maybe a 50 or 55 for like a macro shot. So I've got that there. Let me just compare against this. Yeah, that looks about right. Okay. Yeah, and we've got like the height of the tree there. That looks good. Maybe I've got too much grass here, so I could say maybe 35. We're making everything up here, right? You could also, if you want, just do like a 3x4 or 4x3. We've got different options, but I'm just going to stick to this because I think that looks right to me. And if I had anything in my way, I could always turn the camera clipping plane on to remove anything there. But I can always remove this bottom part in Photoshop later. That's not an issue. So depth of field, always recommend having this on because this helps direct your viewer's eye. So there's focus. So I'm going to set the focus to be, let's see. I usually target something of interest, like this tree is really cool. So I'm going to left click, then right click. If I had anything close to me, it'd be blurred out. I usually keep my blurs around 5 or 7. So I'll leave that there. That way anything in the background or like in the foreground are softened, they're blurred out, and they're not taking away from my my work. So I've got that. Now let's talk about environment settings. Okay. So in 2.10, we got this custom setting where you could do custom daytime and custom night if you wanted to. Which is kind of cool if you want to do like something with the moon, but we're not doing a moon shot. But you do have that if you want. So you can literally, you see the moon right there? You can customize like the phases and everything. It's cool, but we don't need that. Personally, my pro tip is live in the world of HDRI, and I'm a big fan of Midday 2, and I will explain to you why in just a second. So Midday 2, what I like about it is it's a nice blue color, right? A blue sky, but it also has a little bit of clouds, but it also allows me to rotate it and hide clouds if I want. So I don't have clouds here, but I've got some in the windows, which is fine. But once I've got that, I want to turn on the sun. And another pro tip, lately I've been breaking the sun from the HDRI, meaning I have control over a custom sun location. So the HDRI doesn't rotate, but the sun rotates itself. So I do that with the azimuth, right? And notice how my blue sky isn't changing, right? So I can control it this way, and then I can control the height or the altitude right here. So this is how, if I want to match the shadows perfectly, I would do it this way. So this is like a really, really nice trick. I'm going to try and find something similar. I think the altitude's a little bit lower, and I'm going by the distance of that little shadow right there to try and figure it out. Okay, so I'm happy with this. Again, that's HDRI, and then I went custom. Then I could play with the intensity. I usually keep it at 1, and then the radius I keep at about like 5, maybe higher if it's a cloudy day, and that just softens up the shadows. You see how soft those are? And then see how sharp that is. So 5 is a good mix. Okay, and then I can play with the temperature to warm up the scene because it is slightly warmer in here. Okay. And that's generally what I do. If I was doing multiple exterior views, what I would do is I would literally right click this and I'd copy the parameter. And now check this out. If I hit a new view and I fly over here, let me edit the camera. Since it is a copy of it, I could just hit paste parameter and then all my settings come over, even like the camera location and everything. But that's really nice if you want to just carry over environment settings. So let me illustrate that just a little bit better. Let's say I went with geo and sky. This looks completely different. If I right click and then hit paste parameter, see how it picks up this settings. So that's what that is. Make sure you use that. It helps give you consistency across your images. So we've got that. This is beautiful. I could render this. Let's see, with the regular rendering mode or the path tracing mode. Path tracing was added in D5 2.10. If you wanted to use that, you could hit preference and then rendering, turn on path tracing. Right now I have it off just because it takes a little bit longer, but the quality is nicer. You do get sharper reflections and everything. But I'm gonna leave it there for now. And then I'm going to do the interior real quick. I know we're running out of time. I just want to make sure I cover my typical tips and tricks. So if I were to do this, I want to think about where the sun's coming from. It's coming from the side. So I possess the camera here. The aspect ratio, let's do the 9:16 one more time. And now I'm just going to play with my focal length. Maybe I do 35 here. Okay, and do something like that. That's fine. I'm going to save that. And now I'm going to put on 2 point. Again, I'm just going through my typical settings, and then I go to environment. And here I would do my midday again. It doesn't really matter because we don't really see it, but I do see blue here through the window. And that's when I would just rotate it until I get a good enough spot for it and just increase the light. And now I turn on the sun, custom, and then I play with the azimuth so I can get some nice shadows in here. Do something like that. Okay, and then here, because the image is coming off a little dark, I would probably boost the exposure. And you can see I had auto exposure on. So it was kind of giving me the wrong information of like how bright my image is. So I can increase that a little bit just to get some more warmth in there. So those are the general settings I do there. I do want to render out an image just to show the post AI thing because people are asking about that. So let me go to render mode. One thing I want to point out, if I was rendering a bunch of images, you can actually shift click and then go to render mode and then hit render queue, and then it would render all of these three at once. But I only want to do one. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to do 2K just for the sake of time. And I do want to, turn on some channels. I want to turn on the AI post channel. That way it works a little bit better if I want to select specific elements that should be or should not be changed. And I'm just going to render this out. I'm going to save this right on my desktop because I'm bad like that. And let me look at the chat. Do I use lights outside? Okay, so Jenk brought up a great question. With lights, for that interior view, and if I had time, I would actually show you what I would do, but sometimes for like really important windows, like that big central window, I would put a little rectangular light behind it with, like a modest intensity just to get some more light directly through there. I don't do it all the time. It's only for those like focal points or focal windows that I'll use it for. So it's not like every single window gets it. It's just like the key ones where I need a little bit more oomph, without having to change too many settings. And then if I had time, I would probably add some spotlights in the kitchen and everything. But I showed you pretty much most of what I do. One thing I wish I did do was like make the emissive material for the lights, but there's only so much I can cover. So this took me 54 minutes. My path traced renderings took about 7 minutes. So that's why I did this way. So here is the preview. I can run the upscaler right over here, AI enhancer. And I usually do 0.5. And the reason I do 0.5 is I basically lessen the amount of like weight on my image in terms of what's being changed. 0.7, I don't want to say like it gets crazy, but it does add more things, and it changes a little too much, like you're giving AI too much creativity, which is not what I want in this instance. I do want to preserve my image. If I was like really, really like I want to say like paranoid about preserving my image, you do have the option of using the like the partitions and everything. So you could select objects. So that's why I had that channel, that AI channel select. So I could say, hey, just improve the grass or just improve the sky. That's what that's for, which is really, really awesome. So this is waiting. But while that's waiting, let me look at chat just in case anything. Andy, does D5 only work with SketchUp? Does it work? Oh, yeah. So LLT asks, does D5 only work with SketchUp? No, D5 works really well with SketchUp, Rhino, Revit, ArchiCAD, what is it, Vectorworks, basically 3ds Max, any 3D tool you can think of. I think the only difference is like the plugin level. I think in general, most of the plugins are on the same level of parity, meaning like they have live sync and export. Jeff can correct me, but it doesn't have an issue, is my point. Like I know for a fact 3ds Max, Rhino, and SketchUp all have the live sync, meaning you model and you can render at the same time. That's there and that's working well. I'm not sure why this is stuck on waiting. I guess it's because I'm doing a live demo, right? But I would show you what that looks like. Okay, so I'll let that cook. Let's see. What else? Path Tracer almost doubles video rendering time. Yeah, that's expected, just because, yeah, Cinema 4D is another one. Yeah, Path Tracer, it is going to take a lot more time. I mean, Path Tracer is more of like, if you want the quality and you have the time, yeah, go for it. But you know, if you're in a rush and you need to generate a lot of images quick, there's nothing wrong with the rendering engine we have right now. We've been using it for many years and it's phenomenal, right? So I'm not sure what's going on there, but what I could do is show you guys some of the renderings of like the Path Tracer. So this is what, these are AI enhanced images. This is the 0.7 weight and this is the 0.5. It's like so subtle. You're not going to notice in most situations, but you see like right here what it's doing to like the metal. It's like adding a lot more details. That's what I mean about the weight. Less preserves more of the structure of the image. Higher changes much more. And then these are the path trace renderings. In terms of the settings I use 3.3 and 100 samples. And that's what this looked like. The biggest difference you'll see is like the sharpness of the reflections here. So just as a little comparison, this is not ray trace. So there's like literally nothing here. But in the ray trace example, in the path trace example, there's like a nice, sharp, defined reflection, and you even see stuff there. So again, path tracing, yes, it increases the time, but you do get that little quality boost. Things do look generally a little bit more lighter because there's more light bounces and everything, and it has time to calculate. You have to remember that like the current version of the renderer is trying to do all this like in real time and in less than like a minute. But with the path trace method, you're giving it like 5 to 10 minutes to think about it. You know, you're giving it like 10 times the amount of time. So that's why it looks better, but it does take longer. So anyways, I think that's it. Let's see. Path tracing never takes me longer than yeah, I mean, I'm on a 3080, so that's why I say, what's it called? 7 to 8 minutes. Let's see. Hey there, I always have the name show me. Yeah, I'm not sure what happened to the post AI thing. It's weird. Obviously I've gotten images out. That's how I was able to show you, but I don't know. Maybe something's going on. But yeah, that's really it. I hope this was helpful to you guys. Again, you guys will have this file in that Dropbox. You literally have all these. You have the reference photos that I was using, the renderings, so you can compare the typical ray trace versus path trace, and the D5 file, that's what I just saved to, and the SketchUp file. So if you want to spend time working on this further, go ahead, be my guest. That's why we do these things. So you guys have project files to work with. There's a lot of like amazing angles you could take of this project. Like you could go all the way out here and take angles. You can, go here. The whole model is modeled for you, is my point. So you could do interior, exterior. That's my gift to you guys, right? So anyways, that's really it. And then, as always, you guys know I am constantly posting on YouTube and everything. So be sure to check out the channel. And if you are like really serious about ArcViz and learning D5, check out the ArcViz Academy. That's arcviz3dacademy.com. And this is like where you get 24/7 access to me. I can review your work. We can review things together. You can study everything I've got in my brain in this one compact course we just launched the other day, and super excited to see what people think. Anyways, that's it for me, guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andy. That was really insightful. And again, everyone, make sure to scan this QR code, complete the questionnaire for your chance to get D5 Render Pro for free for 14 days. And as Andy mentioned, you can find all the course materials in that Dropbox link. And also make sure to check out ArcViz 3D Academy. And I know there were a lot of questions in the chat that we didn't have a chance to answer. So the team will be sure to go through them and answer any outstanding questions. So again, thanks everyone for taking the time to join us this Thursday afternoon. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
See you guys.